When you place one foot in front of the other repeatedly for kilometers and kilometers, something extraordinary happens inside your skull. It is not merely a fleeting sense of well-being or that euphoria runners call the runner's high. It is something far deeper, far more radical. It is a complete reorganization of how your brain processes information, makes decisions, and solves problems. Alan Turing, the British mathematician who revolutionized our understanding of what machines can do, had a secret that few people know. He was an obsessive long-distance runner. While developing the theory that would found modern computer science, while breaking the Enigma codes during World War II, while thinking about the limits of the computable and the thinkable, Turing ran. He ran kilometers under English rain, ran through forests, ran as if fleeing from something or pursuing a truth that could only be reached in motion. His colleagues at Cambridge watched him disappear for hours, returning sweaty and breathing heavily, his eyes gleaming with a clarity they had not possessed before. He was not a professional athlete. He did not run to compete or break records. He ran because he had discovered something that modern neuroscience is only beginning to confirm. Long-distance running does not merely exercise the body. It completely restarts the operating system of the brain. It is as if each step were an instruction in a universal machine, reprogramming neural circuits, clearing the cache of the mind, reorganizing data stored in billions of synapses. This video is not about fitness. It is not about how to run faster or farther. It is about how rhythmic, sustained, long-duration movement functions as a neurological reset so powerful that it rivals any pharmaceutical or technological intervention. It is about how Turing, without knowing the neurochemical details that science would reveal decades later, had intuitively discovered a fundamental truth, that rigorous thinking, the thinking that changes the world, does not happen at a desk. It happens in motion. It happens when you force your body to maintain a constant rhythm, while your mind, liberated from the need to process complex external stimuli, descends into increasingly deeper layers of abstraction and logic. The human brain is not a static organ. It is a dynamic system in constant reorganization whose operational state changes radically depending on what you are doing with your body. When you are sitting, your brain operates in a specific mode. When you are panicking, it operates in another. When you are in deep rest, in yet another. But when you are running, especially when running for a prolonged period, your brain enters a state that is qualitatively different from any other. It is not merely more active or less active. It is reorganized. It is as if someone had entered your neurological operating system and reconfigured it completely, stripping away the noise, the distractions, the constant background processing that normally consumes your cognitive resources. This is the secret that Turing understood. This is what his colleagues at Bletchley Park witnessed when he returned from his runs with solutions to problems that had seemed intractable hours before. This is what neuroscience now confirms through brain imaging, through measurement of neurotransmitter levels, through tracking of neural connectivity patterns. The brain in motion is not the same brain at rest. It is fundamentally different. And when that motion is sustained, rhythmic, and long duration, the transformation becomes profound. You probably believe you know how your brain works. You think you understand what it means to think. You imagine that your mind is a fixed thing, an organ you carry inside your head, with capacities more or less constant throughout the day. You are completely wrong. Your brain is not a static organ. It is a dynamic system in constant reorganization, whose operational state changes radically depending on what you are doing with your body. When you are sitting, your brain operates in a specific mode. When you are in panic, it operates in another. When you are in deep rest, in yet another. But when you are running, especially when running for a prolonged period, your brain enters a state that is qualitatively different from any other. It is not merely more active or less active. It is reorganized. It is as if someone had entered your neurological operating system and reconfigured it completely, stripping away the noise, the distractions, the constant background processing that normally consumes your cognitive resources. The question you should be asking yourself right now is this: if your brain is not fixed, if it is constantly reorganizing itself based on what your body is doing, then what does that mean for everything you think you know about yourself? What does it mean for your capacity to solve problems, to create, to think rigorously about the most difficult questions? What does it mean that the greatest minds in history, from Turing to Darwin to Beethoven, were all obsessive walkers and runners? What does it mean that you have been taught to sit still, to focus, to concentrate, when the evidence suggests that movement is not a distraction from thinking, but the very foundation of it? You have been told that the mind and body are separate things. You have been told that thinking happens in your head and movement happens in your limbs, and that the two are essentially unrelated except insofar as your body can distract your mind from its work. This is one of the most fundamental lies you have been taught. The mind and body are not separate. They are not even closely related. They are the same thing viewed from different angles. Your brain is not a disembodied processor floating in a vat of nutrients. It is an organ that evolved to control movement, to navigate space, to interact with a physical world. Every circuit in your brain, every neural pathway, every cognitive capacity you possess evolved in the context of a body moving through space. And when you remove that movement, when you sit still for hours, you are not creating optimal conditions for thinking. You are creating conditions of sensory deprivation, of neural starvation, of cognitive constraint. You are asking your brain to do something it was never designed to do, to think without moving. And then you wonder why your thoughts are sluggish, why your creativity is blocked, why the problems that seemed so difficult remain unsolved. Turing understood this. He understood it not through reading neuroscience papers, because those papers did not exist. He understood it through direct experience. He understood it through the simple act of running and noticing what happened to his mind when he did. He noticed that problems that seemed impossible while sitting at a desk became solvable after an hour of running. He noticed that ideas that would not come while he was trying to force them would arrive unbidden while his legs were moving. He noticed that the quality of his thinking changed. It became clearer, sharper, more penetrating. It became capable of grasping abstractions that had seemed beyond reach. And he realized, without the language of modern neuroscience, that something fundamental was happening. His brain was being reset. The operating system was being rebooted. The cache was being cleared. The noise was being stripped away. And in that state of clarity, in that state of neurological reset, he could think thoughts that were not available to him in any other state. The story of Alan Turing is the story of a man who asked the most fundamental question a human being can ask: what is computable? What can a machine do? What are the limits of calculation? These are not merely technical questions. They are philosophical questions. They are questions about the nature of mind, about the nature of thought, about what separates human intelligence from mechanical process. In the 1930s, the mathematical world was in crisis. The foundations of mathematics, which had seemed so solid, had been shaken by the discoveries of Kurt Gödel. Gödel had proven that any formal system powerful enough to describe arithmetic contained statements that could not be proven true or false within that system. This was a catastrophe. It meant that mathematics, the most rigorous and certain form of human knowledge, was incomplete. There were truths that could not be proven. There were questions that could not be answered through pure logic. The mathematical community was reeling from this discovery. David Hilbert, one of the greatest mathematicians of the age, had proposed what became known as the Entscheidungsproblem, the decision problem. The question was simple. Given any mathematical statement, is there a mechanical procedure that can determine whether that statement is true or false? Is there an algorithm that can solve all mathematical problems? This was the question that consumed Turing. This was the question that drove him to develop what would become known as the Turing machine, a theoretical device that could perform any computation that any other device could perform. The Turing machine was not a physical machine. It was a thought experiment, a mathematical abstraction. It consisted of an infinite tape divided into squares, each square containing a symbol or blank. There was a read-write head that could move left or right along the tape, reading symbols, writing symbols, erasing symbols, based on a set of simple rules. The machine had a finite number of internal states, and based on the current state and the symbol being read, it would perform an action and move to a new state. This simple device, with its infinite tape and its finite set of rules, could perform any computation that could be performed by any other device. It could solve any problem that was solvable. And Turing proved something even more remarkable. There were problems that no Turing machine could solve. There were questions that no algorithm could answer. The most famous of these was the halting problem. Given any program and any input, can you determine whether that program will eventually halt or run forever? Turing proved that no algorithm could answer this question for all possible programs and inputs. There was no mechanical procedure that could solve the halting problem. This was a profound discovery. It meant that there were limits to what could be computed. It meant that there were questions that no machine, no matter how powerful, could answer. It meant that the Entscheidungsproblem had a negative answer. There was no mechanical procedure that could determine the truth or falsity of all mathematical statements. But Turing's work had implications far beyond mathematics. It established the theoretical foundations for the computer age. It defined what a computer was, a machine that could perform any computation that was computable. It established the limits of computation. There were things that no computer could do. And it raised a question that would haunt the rest of his life. If a machine can compute anything that is computable, what does that say about the human mind? Is the human mind itself a computer? Can a machine think? These questions led Turing to propose what became known as the Turing test. Instead of asking whether a machine can think, he proposed asking whether a machine can behave indistinguishably from a human in a conversation. If a machine could fool a human into believing it was human, then for all practical purposes, it could think. This was a radical proposal. It shifted the question from the metaphysical realm into the practical realm. It said that thinking is not about some special substance or essence that only humans possess. Thinking is about behavior. Thinking is about the ability to respond to stimuli in ways that are indistinguishable from human response. And if a machine could do that, then the machine could think. The implications were staggering. They suggested that human thought was not unique. They suggested that the human mind was, in some fundamental sense, a machine. They suggested that the boundary between human and machine was not as clear as people wanted to believe, and they suggested that the future would belong to machines that could think, to machines that could compute, to machines that could do everything the human mind could do. Turing had glimpsed the future. He had seen the shape of things to come, and he had done so not through mystical insight or prophetic vision, but through rigorous mathematical reasoning. He had taken the most abstract questions about the nature of mind and computation and translated them into precise mathematical statements. He had proven theorems about what was and was not computable. He had established the theoretical foundations for the computer age, and he had done much of this thinking while running. While his body moved in rhythmic motion, his mind descended into the deepest abstractions of mathematical logic. While his legs carried him through the English countryside, his thoughts ranged across the landscape of the computable and the uncomputable. While his heart pumped blood and his lungs drew in air, his brain was reorganizing itself, clearing away the noise, stripping away the distractions, achieving a state of clarity that allowed him to think thoughts that no one had thought before. But there is something you need to understand about Turing that goes beyond his mathematical achievements. There is something about the way he lived, the way he thought, the way he approached problems, that reveals something fundamental about the nature of rigorous thinking itself. Turing was not content with answers that were merely plausible or probable. He was not satisfied with explanations that worked most of the time or that seemed reasonable. He demanded certainty. He demanded proof. He demanded that every step of reasoning be justified, that every assumption be examined, that every conclusion be derived with absolute rigor from the premises. This was not merely a personality trait. This was a fundamental commitment to truth over comfort. And it was this commitment that made him dangerous. It was this commitment that made him a threat to the comfortable assumptions of his society. Because once you start demanding proof, once you start examining assumptions, once you start insisting on rigorous reasoning, you cannot stop. You cannot pick and choose which assumptions to examine and which to accept without question. You cannot demand rigor in mathematics and then abandon it in social questions. You cannot insist on proof in science and then accept dogma in morality. And Turing did not stop. He did not pick and choose. He applied the same rigorous standards to every question he encountered. He asked the same probing questions about society that he asked about mathematics. He demanded the same proof, the same justification, the same rigorous reasoning. And this made him a threat. This made him dangerous. This made him, ultimately, a victim of the very society that benefited from his genius. The story of Turing's life is the story of a man who understood something that most people never grasp, that rigorous thinking is not a luxury, not an optional extra, not something you do when you have time. It is a necessity. It is the foundation of everything that matters. It is the only way to distinguish truth from falsehood, reality from illusion, what is actually the case from what we merely wish to be the case. And the price of that understanding is high. The price is that you can never again accept comfortable lies. The price is that you must always question, always probe, always demand justification. The price is that you become, in some sense, an outsider to society, because society is built on comfortable lies, on unexamined assumptions, on the acceptance of things that cannot be proven. Turing paid that price. He paid it in his work, in his thinking, in his relentless pursuit of truth. And he paid it in his life, in the way he was treated, in the way society destroyed him for being different, for being honest, for being unwilling to accept the comfortable lies that held society together. Here is a question for you. If you were in Turing's position, if you had discovered what he discovered, if you had glimpsed the future as clearly as he had, would you have continued? Would you have kept pushing, kept questioning, kept demanding rigor and truth, knowing that it would make you an outsider, knowing that it would put you at odds with society, knowing that it might destroy you? Or would you have stopped? Would you have accepted the comfortable lies? Would you have kept your discoveries to yourself and lived a quiet, safe life? I am genuinely curious what you think. Every perspective in the comments builds something that no algorithm can create. A genuine human conversation. A conversation where people think together, where ideas are tested and refined, where truth emerges not from the pronouncements of authorities, but from the collective reasoning of minds engaged with the problem. The implications of Turing's work extend far beyond the theoretical realm of mathematics and computation. They reach into the practical world of technology, into the structure of modern civilization, into the very nature of how we think and how we live. When Turing was developing his theory of computation, he was not thinking about smartphones or artificial intelligence or the internet. He was thinking about the most abstract questions of mathematics, and yet every computer that exists today, every smartphone, every laptop, every server, every piece of digital technology that surrounds us is built on the foundations that Turing laid. The architecture of modern computers, the way they process information, the way they execute instructions, all of this flows directly from Turing's theoretical work. The Turing machine was not just a thought experiment. It was a blueprint. It was a specification for what a computer should be. And when engineers began building actual computers, they built them according to Turing's specifications. They created machines with finite states, with read-write heads, with the ability to move through memory, with the capacity to execute instructions based on simple rules. They created machines that could perform any computation that was computable. They created universal machines, machines that could simulate any other machine, machines that could run any program. This was revolutionary. Before Turing, people thought of machines as specialized devices. A calculator calculated, a loom wove cloth, a printing press printed. Each machine did one thing. But Turing's insight was that you could create a machine that could do anything, a universal machine that could simulate any other machine, that could run any program, that could perform any computation. This insight led directly to the modern computer. It led to the idea of software, of programs that could be loaded into a machine and executed. It led to the idea that the same physical hardware could be used for different purposes simply by loading different software. It led to the entire digital revolution, and it all flowed from Turing's theoretical work, from his thinking about the limits of computation, from his insights achieved while running through the English countryside. But the implications go even deeper. Turing's work on computation led to his work on artificial intelligence. He asked the question, if a machine can compute anything that is computable, can a machine think? Can a machine pass the Turing test? Can a machine engage in a conversation that is indistinguishable from a human conversation? These questions led to the field of artificial intelligence. They led to decades of research into how to make machines that could think, that could reason, that could solve problems. And today, we are seeing the fruits of that research. We have machines that can recognize faces, that can translate languages, that can play chess and Go at superhuman levels, that can generate text that is indistinguishable from human writing. We have machines that are beginning to pass the Turing test. We have machines that can engage in conversations that fool people into thinking they are talking to a human. And all of this flows from Turing's theoretical work, from his insights about computation and intelligence. But there is something else that Turing understood, something that modern AI researchers are only beginning to grasp. Turing understood that intelligence is not a single thing. It is not a unitary capacity that you either have or do not have. Intelligence is multifaceted. It is the ability to solve problems, to recognize patterns, to learn from experience, to adapt to new situations, to communicate, to create. And Turing understood that a machine could be intelligent in some ways without being intelligent in others. A machine could be brilliant at chess without being able to understand a joke. A machine could be able to translate languages without being able to write poetry. A machine could pass the Turing test in one domain without being able to pass it in another. This understanding is crucial for understanding modern artificial intelligence. The machines we have today are not generally intelligent. They are not conscious. They do not understand the world the way humans do, but they are intelligent in specific, narrow domains. They can do things that humans cannot do. They can process information faster. They can hold more data in memory. They can perform calculations with perfect accuracy. And in those narrow domains, they can be superhuman. But in other domains, they are helpless. They cannot understand context the way humans do. They cannot grasp meaning the way humans do. They cannot navigate the physical world the way humans do. They cannot feel emotions the way humans do. And this asymmetry, this uneven distribution of intelligence, is something that Turing grasped intuitively. He understood that the question was not whether machines could think, but what kinds of thinking machines could do. And he understood that the answer would be surprising. He understood that machines would be able to do some things better than humans and other things not at all. He understood that the future would not be a simple replacement of human intelligence by machine intelligence, but a complex interplay between the two, a partnership in which each compensated for the limitations of the other. This is the world we are living in today. This is the world that Turing foresaw. And it is a world that is still unfolding, still revealing new possibilities, still surprising us with what machines can do and what they cannot do. The implications of Turing's work continue to ripple outward, affecting not just technology but society, economics, politics, the very structure of human civilization. We are living in the age that Turing created. We are living in a world shaped by his insights. And we are only beginning to understand the full implications of what he discovered. The question that Turing raised, the question of whether machines can think, is not merely a technical question. It is a philosophical question. It is a question about the nature of mind, about what makes us human, about what separates us from machines. And it is a question that we are still struggling to answer. Because the more we learn about how the brain works, the more we learn about how machines work, the less clear the distinction becomes. We discover that the brain is not some magical organ that operates according to principles fundamentally different from machines. The brain is a machine. It is a biological machine, but it is a machine nonetheless. It processes information. It executes algorithms. It follows rules. It is subject to the laws of physics and chemistry, just like any other machine. And if the brain is a machine, then what does that say about consciousness? What does it say about free will? What does it say about the things that make us human? These are the questions that Turing's work raises. These are the questions that we are still struggling to answer, and they are questions that matter. They matter because they affect how we think about ourselves, how we think about machines, how we think about the future. They matter because they affect the choices we make, the values we hold, the kind of world we want to create. Turing understood this. He understood that the questions he was asking were not merely academic. They were questions about the nature of reality, about the nature of mind, about the nature of human existence. And he pursued those questions with a rigor and a honesty that was rare in his time and remains rare today. He was willing to follow the logic wherever it led, even when it led to uncomfortable conclusions. He was willing to question assumptions that everyone else took for granted. He was willing to think thoughts that no one had thought before. And he did all of this while running, while his body moved in rhythmic motion, while his brain was being reset and reorganized by the simple act of sustained movement. This is the secret that Turing knew. This is the insight that modern neuroscience is confirming. Rigorous thinking, the kind of thinking that changes the world, does not happen in isolation. It does not happen when you are sitting still, when you are trying to force your mind to work, when you are straining against resistance. It happens when you are moving, when your body is engaged in rhythmic motion, when your brain is being reset and reorganized by the simple act of sustained physical activity. It happens when you are running. Now you understand why Turing ran. Now you understand why he disappeared for hours into the English countryside, why he returned with solutions to problems that had seemed intractable, why his colleagues noticed that his best ideas came after his runs. He was not running to stay fit. He was not running to escape. He was running because he had discovered, through direct experience, what neuroscience now confirms through brain imaging and neurochemical analysis, that the brain in motion is a different brain, that sustained rhythmic movement reorganizes neural circuits, clears cognitive cache, strips away noise and distraction, and creates a state of clarity that is not available in any other way. He was running because he understood, at a level deeper than conscious reasoning, that thinking and moving are not separate activities. They are aspects of the same process. They are two sides of the same coin. And when you separate them, when you try to think without moving, you are working against the fundamental design of your brain. You are asking it to do something it was not designed to do. You are creating conditions of cognitive constraint that make rigorous thinking harder, not easier. This is the secret that Turing knew. This is the insight that could transform your life. Because if rigorous thinking, the kind of thinking that solves problems and creates new knowledge, is enhanced by movement, then the way you approach your work your studies, your creative projects should change. You should not be sitting at a desk straining to think. You should be moving. You should be running. You should be walking. You should be engaging your body in sustained rhythmic motion while your mind works on the problems that matter to you. This is not a distraction from thinking. This is the foundation of thinking. This is how the greatest minds in history have worked. This is how Turing worked, and this is how you can work too. The reset is waiting for you. All you have to do is start running. Note: this Rotero combines educational information with narrative entertainment elements to explore the historical and scientific dimensions of Alan Turing's life and work, as well as the neuroscientific principles underlying the relationship between physical movement and cognitive function.